Please come in. You're right on time. The door only opens when the clock strikes midnight. Georgia and Hannah are preparing to broadcast from the belfry. Just like this old bell tower, they have many stories to tell. Some old and some new. Follow me up these stairs, but mind your step. Ah, they're waiting for you.
I just realized I don't have a notebook. Oh my god. I can use my paper. Here, it's okay. I'll only need paper for when you talk. So, okay. Why does Zoom look different? It's like it updated or something. That's
Mine looks the
crazy.
same, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I think it looks the same. Okay.
Okay.
I'm so broke out. Well, I started my period. Shocker. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, I've been going crazy right in here. I did get those patches, but they don't really help.
I've never had any real luck with those either. I don't know what these other people are doing.
They have
That's,
different zits than us. Well,
yeah,
usually when I get
probably.
them on my chin, they're like fucking cystic, you know?
Yeah, all my
And
ones
like,
down here are cystic. And like
I
lately
feel like
I've
those
been
don't help that.
noticing that like my skin here looks really wrinkly, but it's just scars from like 20 years of cystic acne.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have a turkey neck.
Hell yeah.
I need to get one of those the red light.
Squasha?
No,
Oh,
the light therapy ones.
yeah.
Keep looking at them on Amazon, but I haven't got one yet. But I'm probably gonna get one at some point in the near future. Anyway, but I just ordered a button maker, so that was my Amazon budget.
One moment, please.
Are you adding that to the list, bitch?
Shut up. Okay.
It's fine. I'm just gonna buy everything myself and ruin your plans.
You don't even know what's on this list, bitch.
You don't even know what's on my list, and it's only one thing.
I know.
You'd never guess it though. It's fine.
Hey, Georgia,
What?
when do you think that we started believing in ghosts?
In ancient times.
You got it, dude.
Yay!
Well, actually, before writing was invented over 5,000 years ago, when people could start writing down explanations for why they did the things that they did,
Mm-hmm.
human beings have been buried with goods that could be useful in the afterlife.
Uh-huh.
So, technically, a bit longer than the
Uh-huh.
ancient civilizations that can write. Uh, and they were
Uh-huh.
doing this in whatever culture across the globe. You know, Neanderthals were doing it, right?
Neanderthals. Yes.
Now, why would they do that if the person could no longer speak, move around, or eat? I don't know. It stems mostly from people's concept of the soul and what happens to the soul
Mm-hmm.
beyond death. The details of afterlife in different cultures varies, but the constants were that such a realm exists, that it was governed by immutable laws, and that the souls of the dead would remain there unless given license by the gods to return to the land of the living for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's just generally the
Mm-hmm.
shtick. In ancient Mesopotamia,
We
death
love
was
her.
thought to gradually weaken the connections that bound the deceased person to the land of the living rather than bring an abrupt, complete exit. Ancient Mesopotamians accepted ghosts as a part of everyday life. In the Babylonian creation story, humans are actually they're created by senior gods to perform the menial work of the lesser gods who in the time when humans were created, the lesser gods were actually on strike. They were rebelling against the senior gods. At one point, the leader of that rebellion is killed, and his body and blood are mixed with the clay of the earth to make humans.
Oh yeah. That sounds so familiar.
That spirit, or what they call etemu, then becomes an integral part of humanity. The combination of God and earth gives the humans a mortal body, the clay, and
Uh-huh.
an immortal soul that lives on after the mortal body is no more. And that's
Fun.
their belief in,
I like that one.
immortal soul, afterlife. Their afterlife was also kind of a terrible place called Irkala, where those immortal souls sipped water from mud puddles and ate dirt.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily like tortured or anything. Everybody just kind of lived in this dark and desolate
I mean, I feel like I did that when I was a kid, so
desert place. Yeah, yeah. Just eat worms and such.
I mean, to be fair, I've eaten a lot of dirt as an adult too, but not on purpose.
Yeah, same. As archaeologists, it just kind of happens.
It just
I've
happens.
definitely breathed in so much dirt,
Yeah, even to this
debris.
day, I think my one water bottle, my like Nalgene with my,
Hmm.
like university logo on it, I think it still has like tephra from Mount Rainier like caked into the like where the
Yeah, the
top screws
little,
on.
yeah.
Like no matter how many times I wash it, it will never come off. It's just there. And I'm not really that mad about it, honestly. It's a little nostalgic.
My old water bottle before this one, the one that was like
The blue
blue,
one.
the
Hmm.
blue one, um, it had all of the like stainless steel striations and stuff. It was pretty dusty and nasty with all of the dirt. This one is fine.
I'll be reunited with
Anyway,
my old water bottle next week.
yay. And so ancient Mesopotamians could only leave the afterlife if they had to, air quotes, complete a mission for their ancestors. So I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of talking to the spirits of your ancestors and asking them for help or protection.
Hmm.
Uh, those were the kinds of missions they'd be sent on, like to,
Oh,
you know, watch over somebody in childbirth or something, make sure that someone was safe on their traveling journey somewhere.
I know we're not talking about China, but I'm just thinking about Mulan.
Oh, don't worry. I will be talking about China.
I kind of thought you might, but okay.
It wouldn't be my episode if I didn't take us on a goddamn world tour.
Whee!
Around 1500 BCE, some Babylonian person, I don't have a name, decided to inscribe some
Some
drawings
guy.
onto some tablets with a story that researchers believe to actually be a guide for exorcising ghosts in
Oh,
1500 BC.
the
BCE.
the original Exorcist.
Yeah. One of the tablets actually recently, just a couple of years ago, went on exhibit at the British Museum in London.
Oh, did they steal it?
Yeah, they did. They the curators in the article that I read actually mentioned that they've had one of these tablets in their collections for like a really long time, but it was never put on exhibit because they never truly understood what it meant
Hmm.
until they were going through and checking all the accessions. And they're like,
Uh-huh.
oh, what's this? And they found that it matched some other tablets that were found in other cities, kind of all over Europe, actually. Like, I think there's one in Germany, one in Spain. Anyway,
Hmm.
all of these clay tablets matched up, and I'll read what they speculate this guide to be. Oh,
Okay.
by the way, the tablet that they have is small enough to like fit in your hand.
Oh, it's just a
So
little guy.
it's just a broken piece. So
Uh-huh.
it potentially, it could have been like one as part of a set, or it could be
Hmm.
like kind of a longer thing that you put up on a wall, unknown. The directions call for the exorcist to make figurines of two figurines, one each of a man and a woman. You prepare 2 vessels of beer and, at sunrise, speak ritual words calling on the Mesopotamian god Shamash, who was responsible for bringing ghosts to the underworld, the Reaper. Researchers believe the idea was to transfer the ghost to one of those figurines. The text's final line urges readers to not look behind you! Exclamation point.
Oh.
And it's unclear whether that's for the ghosts who are entering the underworld to not look behind them and see Shamash, or if it's for the reader.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like if you're opening a portal for them to return, you don't want to look into it.
Exactly. Or else you could also be sucked in.
That's some Lovecraftian shit right there.
I know. It's so cool. In ancient Egypt, some stories and songs implied that people should try to stay in the world of the living after death so they don't miss out on the pleasures of this life. But there are some other stories and or oral traditions that said, and here's a little quote. I have heard those songs that are in the ancient tombs and what they tell in extolling life on earth and in belittling the necropolis. All our kinsfolk rest within it since the very beginning of time. The offspring of millions all arrive there, for there can be no lingering in the land of Egypt, nor is there one who does not reach it. As for the span of earthly affairs, it is the instant of a dream, but a fair welcome is accorded him who has attained the West. Basically, you just need to accept the inevitability of death, and being on the plane of Earth is a blessing. You should feel lucky to be here.
Yeah.
And it's just a small bit of time for you to prove your worth in the afterlife.
Live life while you got it.
Yeah. As you and I know, in the Egyptian afterlife, or the Hall of Truth, you're judged by Osiris and the 42 judges, and then you're sent to the field of reeds, or you're eaten, basically. Eaten, your soul sucked out, and you are forgotten forever by Amut.
Yeah.
Yeah. During the Ramesside period, or around 1200 BCE, another unnamed Egyptian person wrote a ghost story on an ostraka wherein an unnamed man had to spend the night next to a tomb in the Theban necropolis, only to be awakened by a ghost living in the tomb. The man then ran to the high priest of Amun, who tries speaking with the gods to call the ghost to him. He is successful. The priest offers the ghost to make a new tomb and a gilded wooden coffin, but the ghost isn't convinced of the priest's intentions. So they sit and talk for a while, and then the ghost tells the priest about how his tomb collapsed and other people have come through and been like, yeah, I'll move you to a new tomb and I'll give you all this stuff and I'll revere you. But unfortunately, no results. No one has ever successfully actually helped this ghost. Well, this
poor guy
priest does actually find a new place for a tomb and is successful in giving this guy peace in the afterlife. He's able to actually go to the field of reeds or go back.
Like, even in terms of tropes and like, my resting place has been disturbed, so now I am a restless spirit.
Yeah.
It's like 3,000 years and nothing's changed.
I know, that's really a commonality in a lot of these, is if like funerary practices aren't done properly or upheld properly, then someone's spirit comes back or someone's soul returns, because that's considered disrespecting them. And so now they have to return and make sure that you correct it, basically.
Yeah.
It's
like we shouldn't dig up people's graves or something.
I know. Yeah, you shouldn't mess with the dead because they're disgusting and they will really mess you up.
They'll probably make you sick.
Yes. Because of
germs,
how nasty they are. Yeah. In ancient Greece, what were you gonna say?
Anal seepage.
Bruh, we can't keep talking about this. Gotta plug them up. Gotta plug them up. Speaking of ancient Greece, uh,
uh-huh.
I heard recently that kind of like other funerary practices in ancient Greece, they would like shove gems up people's butts when they died. Like if they were a rich person.
Interesting.
Yeah. To like make sure there was no seepage. I don't know if this is true or not, but it was just
I
something that
mean,
I read.
it's a pretty safe place to keep them too if you need them in the afterlife, I guess.
Exactly, bro. Exactly. Well, I was just about to mention like uh that there were steps to reaching the afterlife in ancient
Uh-huh.
Greece, and there's the whole like you put the coin in your mouth so the ferryman can take your soul across the river Styx.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's a way to like get you expedited, like the express ferry. You know what I'm saying? Like go a little bit quicker by putting a gem in your butthole.
You just like walk up to the banks of the river and you're like, hold on 1 second. And you gotta like
Yeah, instead of being like, you're like,
Yeah. What if
sorry, 1 second.
this was really stuck? I wish they would have used a polished one. Oh my God. I was
Gross.
gonna say, I wonder if people who have the coins on their eyes, like they're still just like
Oh yeah, they're
walking around
blind.
blindly.
Yeah, maybe.
They just fall in the river. I don't know.
And they're sent away forever.
Yep.
Yeah. Um.
Uh-huh.
So speaking of steps, so the first step,
Uh-huh.
put a coin in your mouth, pay the ferryman, go across the river Styx. Once you're on the other side, you pass Cerberus, the three-headed dog.
Mm-hmm.
Love Cerberus.
Mm-hmm.
Woof, woof, woof. You stand before the three judges. You give an account of your life. The judges make their decision. And from there, you drink water from the river Leith and
Mm-hmm.
forget your former life on Earth forever.
Mm-hmm.
You're then sent to the Elysian Fields if you died in battle,
Mm-hmm.
the Plain of Asphodel if you died as a good person, or Tartarus if you died as a bad person.
Right, right.
Souls were not expected to return to Earth, but they still did if proper burial rites weren't followed after an untimely or unjust death, like murder.
Uh-huh.
And I should say, ancient Rome was essentially the same. Their
Gee,
afterlife
I
was.
can't imagine why.
They just had different names for everything, and all
Mm-hmm.
of the visuals were very distinctly Roman, or the
Mm-hmm.
rituals to get to the afterlife. In the first century AD, the Roman author Pliny the Younger recorded one of the first notable ghost stories in his letters to the people. The letters became famous for his vivid account of life during like peak Roman Empire, and it included an excerpt which he questioned the validity of ghosts, or as he says, specters.
Oh.
I am extremely desirous, therefore, to know your sentiments concerning specters, whether you believe they actually exist and have their own proper shapes and a measure of divinity, or are only the false impressions of a terrified imagination. Could be a
Okay.
hallucination. I'll
Uh-huh.
talk about that later. He goes on to talk about a brief ghost story and says there was at Athens a large and spacious but ill-reputed and pestilential house. In the dead of the night, a noise resembling the clashing of iron was frequently heard, which, if you listened more attentively, sounded like the rattling of fetters. At first, it seemed at a distance, but approached nearer by degrees. Immediately afterward, a phantom appeared in the form of an old man, extremely meager and squalid, with a long beard and bristling hair, rattling the gyves on his feet and hands. I don't know what squalid meant before this. It just means like kind of crotchety and nasty
Yeah.
looking.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, why is he doing the drive-by and this old man? What the fuck?
Well, this is a translation, but so I
Yeah.
could only imagine what the actual text was before this. Like, what beat down did he just give this ghost man? Like, what roast? Like Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The story goes on for a bit longer, but he explains that the people who witnessed the ghost were terrified, even during the daytime when they knew that the figure wouldn't appear. The building was eventually abandoned and someone else bought the property. This guy actually paid attention to this ghost and was terrified, but was like, oh, this guy kind of looks like he wants me to follow him. So he followed him. He took him to the courtyard and vanished. The next day, the owner asked his servants to dig up the spot that the ghost disappeared on, and they found bones with iron chains still attached.
Oh.
So the owner gave the bones a proper burial, and the house was no longer haunted.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
In ancient China, someone who died by drowning in battle, who died alone, or by some other suffering that resulted in no burial, would inevitably return to the earthly plane. The Chinese afterlife was also thought of as a journey in which the soul has to cross a bridge over an abyss, wherein they're judged by a series of spiritual beings. If they're found worthy, they're allowed to continue on. They're also not allowed to look back, for if they look back, they'll tumble into the abyss. But once they reach the other side of this bridge, they drink what's called mengpo soup to forget their former life. That sounds kind of familiar. If this person's soul is found unworthy, if they're found to have done some terrible things in their life, they slip down into the abyss where they will remain. And in kind of like Mesopotamia, it's just a desolate plain of darkness and boring dirt and shit. In either case, the soul isn't meant to return to the land of the living. And if one did, it wasn't like an ancestor appearing in a dream with a warning or advice, or, like the ancestral spirit we talked about. Then it had to have been some kind of evil force involved. Like if you didn't recognize this thing, this apparition or something coming back as one of your ancestors, then it's like, oh, it's not good.
Right.
Chinese philosopher Mozi, who founded Moism, it's kind of narcissistic naming this form of philosophy after yourself, but like whatever, everybody did that.
I was gonna say, I feel like
in
a lot of people
around
did that.
Yeah, which I feel like kind of says a lot about these people. They feel so high and mighty.
Yeah.
He founded Moism around 400 BCE ish, and Moism is a philosophical system describing that one's actions define one's character, and that the meaning of life is to emphasize universal love, and it is also the solution to all world conflicts is loving each other. He argued ghosts to be an integral part of reality after he heard a report of a deceased political minister named Tupo returning from the dead and assassinating Shuan, or the king of Zhao. His reasoning lies in trusting everybody and that we should believe people if their story seems credible and they seem like reliable witnesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if they're good liars?
That's what I was thinking. What if they just seem like really credible, even though they're not?
Yeah, that's like literally what a con man is.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, typically in China, ghosts were considered part of everyday life in the form of ancestor spirits. And it's kind of understood that you need to honor your ancestors through your daily actions and devotions, and doing so would grant their help. Although some souls return for other reasons, like to preach a certain ethic, usually at the behest of some evil force or dark spirit. In a story from 1680 CE, a man named Ning visits a temple where the ghost of a woman named Nie tries to seduce him. He resists, saying he must stay virtuous, that he cannot partake.
Mm-hmm.
After multiple attempts, and two other travelers are found murdered in the temple with their blood drained through the soles of their feet, like a hole in the soles of their feet.
Gross.
The ghost Nie comes to respect Ning. So she tells him her story. She died in the temple when she was 18 and came under the control of a monster demon who inhabited the ground that she was buried in at the temple. Crazy that a monster was chilling at this temple, but hey, it happens. Sometimes they just want to see what's going on, you know what I'm saying?
It's like Beowulf all over again. No, that's not a temple though. It's fine.
No, whatever. The monster required her to seduce travelers and drain their blood, which she then fed to him. So Ning, the guy, digs up her remains and reburies her near his house, performing appropriate funerary rites, and then moves to leave. Well, turns out she comes back to life due to
Oh.
his consistent virtuous conduct and his efforts to rebury her properly. So then they
Oh.
get married and have a bunch of babies.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So if you stay abstinent, Georgia,
Uh-huh.
you can help some poor person come back to life and
Well,
have babies.
that ship's already sailed. Well, maybe that's what my snails did.
Maybe they stayed celibate
Yeah.
until they got married and then they had a billion babies.
Yeah.
Just so many babies.
Yeah. There's more too that haven't hatched yet.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that. I the eggs must be like so small.
I can send you a picture of them. They're like little. It kind of looks like, you know when you like spit into water and like the bubbles, it kind of looks like
Oh,
that.
weird. I
But
love
like
it.
on a leaf instead of on top of the
On a
water.
leaf.
Yeah.
So cute.
Yeah. I'll send you a picture later.
In ancient India,
Mm-hmm.
the practice of cremation became very popular as that was believed to be the only method to make sure that a spirit could not return and reanimate their own corpse. Sound familiar? The
Mm.
cremation ground in the
Mm-hmm.
Vatala story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in Hinduism and Buddhism, there isn't necessarily immediately an afterlife, but rather a near endless cycle of samsara or
Mm-hmm.
birth, death, and rebirth, like a cyclical situation, reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
In this belief, one's actions or karma throughout your life impact the conditions and status of your next life, and you'd move up or down the social hierarchy accordingly. Sometimes, due to wrongful or early death, one's soul wouldn't move on to the next reincarnation and would stick around instead, feeling wronged, usually in their own
Weird.
bodies. But if they couldn't do that, they would haunt places or things. Stories of haunted regions, houses, and even cities have been present for many centuries in Indian folklore. One of those locations is Bangar Fort in Rajasthan, which was built in 1573 and was seemingly thriving until a hermit cursed the city for being neglected on the streets. And after he went out in public and like cursed this city, the next day, all of the upper stories of the city buildings collapsed overnight.
Oh
Like they were
no.
all destroyed. Um, Presumably, what may have really happened was bad architecture and an earthquake.
I was gonna say, that sounds like an earthquake.
Yeah, there are conflicting stories about this. It's believed that he was able to access some evil divine power and do this, but
Mhm.
it was also possible he was in contact with a witch.
Sure.
In ancient Mesoamerica,
Oh, girl.
Mayans believed in something similar to the Mesopotamians and that the underworld was kind of a shitty place, but the
Mhm.
lords of the dead could trick souls into reaching the mortal plane for themselves. So when a person died, they'd be led across a great ocean by a dog who'd help them reach the tree of life, which the soul would then have to climb to paradise. Any soul that returned to earth or who was unable to climb the tree of life were considered unnatural and typically inhabited um, plant life,
Mhm.
either beneficial or terrible for you, like poisonous. The legend of Extebe refers to this happening to two women, Exkaban and Utskalel, or Utskalel, unknown on the pronunciation. I look everywhere, but I just found like a translated story.
Yeah.
Exkaban was treated like shit by
Mhm.
everybody except the lower classes because
Wow.
she had sex outside of marriage.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh. Lutz Kalel was born into a rich family and was loved by everyone in the upper classes, but she was a total bitch and she was only kind for the sake of herself. One
Uh-huh.
day, Exkaban was found dead, and her body smelled so lovely, like a
Oh.
lovely flowery fragrance. The day after she was buried, beautiful wildflowers had bloomed all over her grave and carried the same scent, like
Mhm.
that lovely scent that her body had. Not soon after, Utskalel also died, but her body stank really fucking bad. No flowers bloomed from her grave the next day, and any that people from those who loved her planted on her grave immediately died. So in the afterlife, when she found out that the other woman, Exkaban, had beautiful flowers on her grave, she joined forces with a dark spirit or one of the lords of the dead
Mhm.
and decided to try and return to Earth so she could uh,
She's the mean one.
have yeah, she's the mean one. Have
Okay.
sex with whoever she wanted, like Excavate did or Excaban did, but because her motivations were ambitious rather than through love, she did not return as beautiful flowers. She actually returned as a cactus flower
Oh.
and did nothing but unintentionally harm people.
Yep. That sounds about right.
So ghosts, having been deprived of eternal
Oh.
rest by what?
Are you not going to talk about Aztecs?
Oh no, I did have a section on Aztecs. Do you want to talk about Aztecs?
I can.
Sure.
I know that. Give me one second.
I also have one of my sources talks about Aztecs, but I had a lot of stuff. So
Yeah, most of the thing that I always remember about Aztecs is that warriors are reincarnated as butterflies. Like, I just like that.
right.
That four is a big like I can't remember. Four is like a big number in Aztec afterlife beliefs. And women who die in childbirth are like equal to warriors, I believe, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, which I thought was very cool. And I know the rain god is associated a lot with Aztec afterlife beliefs. Um,
There's the goddess of the underworld, oh god,
Mictlan.
Mictacahua god,
Um,
Mictacahuatl. Uh, because that
mm,
was the original deity observed for the Day of the Dead.
right. Mictlan is the Aztec afterlife. But they
Yeah.
have, that's also a thing where like you have to go through like one level is basically like a trial,
Hmm.
like a physical difficult terrain that you have to cross. in order to get through to the other side. It's
Yeah.
not, you're not crossing a river, but
Yeah, not crossing a river, you're not climbing a tree, you're not crossing a bridge over an abyss,
mhm.
etc.
And there's like 13 different layers of heaven.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I can't
The one
that
thing that I read was that, like, I just read that there was a journey, and that, similar to the Mayan belief, there were spirit dogs that could help guide you,
mhm.
which I thought was really sweet. I love doggies. They're so good.
Women who died in childbirth were seen as powerful vessels full of dangerous magic.
Slay.
Isn't that awesome?
We love a dangerous woman.
We do. And in those cases, the husband and midwives were the only people who made up the mourning party. They were the only person allowed to be in her presence. And she would
Ooh.
be buried at crossroads.
Crossroads. Ooh, I
Yeah.
love a good crossroads ghost.
Yeah, and they weren't taken out through the front of the house either. If they died in the home, that was considered bad luck. So they would fucking knock a hole through the back of the house and take the body out
My
that
God.
way. Um,
Cool.
isn't that
I mean,
crazy?
RIP the house, but, like,
I know, right?
whatever.
The Florentine Codex describes victims of drowning as being carried on a litter by priests to the place of burial, but it also states that those persons related to the victim should be careful not to bathe too much, as it was believed they would be struck by lightning or also drowned.
Wow.
Like,
What was the other one that was like drowning? Hold on. I think it was yeah, in China, someone who
oh yeah,
died by drowning was guaranteed to come back, because that's not a proper burial. You're
no.
not buried, you
If
died
the
in the
body's not
water.
recovered, yeah.
Yeah.
But then we now have actual sea burials, like especially
Mhm.
with people who die on boats and they get buried at sea, which I always thought that kind of sounded kind of nice.
If you think about, like, vengeful ghosts coming from drowning or
Mhm.
being buried, air quotes, at sea, no wonder we have so many terrible, awful ocean related environmental crises,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
global warming, rising sea levels, hurricanes and monsoons and such, because of all of the enslaved people that were thrown into the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Just
think
throughout time.
I think Taboo, that show that we've been watching, kind of touches on that a little bit.
Mm.
Because one of the main story points is a ship sank and all the enslaved people went down with it. I misspoke earlier. Miklan is like the bad place. Klalakan is the heaven.
Okay.
Miklan is like everything. And Klalak, the rain god, oversees Klalakan, obviously. And I think it's because because rain was so important to their worldview,
Hmm.
for crops and everything. I mean, they like sacrificed children to Tlalak because they believed that the crying children on their way to their death, like the tears,
Hmm.
were symbolic of the rain that they needed for the crops to grow.
Yeah. If they thought
So,
it worked, you know.
yeah. Yeah, and Miklan is the place that you journey through to
Okay.
get to the afterlife. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I want a
And it's
journey. I
okay.
would fail. I would fucking fail. What are we talking about?
Blah, 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 blah. Okay, similar to Tlalocan was another paradise reserved for innocent children. And then in the eastern sky, there's something called the House of the Sun, and that's where the warriors would gather to greet the sun. This is from a paper I wrote for my
Hmm.
Mesoamerican class. It's there that the warriors would greet the sun as it completed its journey through Mitlan at night, ready to rise again. They then escorted the sun to its zenith, the highest point in the sky, and with their duties complete, they returned to Klalakan until the next morning. At its zenith, the sun was then met by warrior women, women who had died giving birth and now resided in the western sky. The warrior women would escort the sun down to the western horizon, where it would begin its journey through the underworld again. And after 4 years, both
Hell
the
yeah.
men and women warriors were freed of their duties. The male warriors returned to Earth as hummingbirds and continued to welcome the dawn with their song. The women, on the other hand, returned to Earth as women goddesses or women princesses to haunt crossroads and afflict victims with deformities and misfortune.
Wow.
There we go.
I love women.
Afflict victims.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, yeah. I like that women women enduring childbirth is seen as battle.
Well, yeah. Your butthole can get ripped open.
Yeah,
That's
Melinda.
battle. Yeah, mom. She did text me after that. Hold on. I don't think that I sent you her response. She said, but it doesn't stay that way. Ha ha ha. You came so fast, you ripped me from stem to stern. All better now. Your sis gave the doctor enough time to snip it for me, but actually the tear healed faster than the snip. I said, this is why giving birth doesn't sound fun. She said, it's not fun, but the result is worth it. And it all happened so fast, for me anyway, that I barely knew what was going on. LOL.
Yeah, meanwhile, my mom was in labor for like 40 some hours.
Yeah, some people, go through it pretty quick. Some
And
people
that's
do
why
not.
I'm an only child. That's not why I'm an only child, but I think it's funny.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so ghosts, having been deprived of eternal rest by staying within the earthly plane of existence, have generally been considered objects of sympathy or pity. Ancient civilizations on every continent held some kind of beliefs involving soul survival after bodily death, as I've just mentioned. And in many cases, when a soul belonging to whatever realm of the dead the culture believed in returned to the living world due to improper funeral rites or unfinished business. That's just like a summary of what I just fucking talked about.
uh-huh.
So, gonna talk about in Christianity,
Hell yeah.
the afterlife is a dualistic one. We, know heaven and hell. Heaven is a paradise where souls ascend after doing everything right according to Jesus, and there they can exist eternally with God. And then hell is reserved for souls who have strayed from the path of righteousness and have not sought redemption or have not confessed their sins.
Or paid a lot of money.
But that is seeking redemption too. In Islam, they also have a pretty dualistic, like heaven and hell, or Jannah and Jannaham, or it's Khana and Khanaham. One is a paradise of peace and beauty, where those who lived under the Quran, maintained faith in Allah, and performed commendable deeds can go. And hell is reserved for those who defy God's teachings. That's it. And then in Judaism, there are different stories depending on who you read. There are some that talk about how a heaven and hell essentially exist, but generally there's a significant emphasis on leading a purposeful, ethical life in the present by performing mitzvah or good deeds and focusing on your earthly responsibilities rather than worrying about what's going to happen to you after you die. Like, what's the point of worrying about later if I'm here right now? If there is something in the afterlife, then I can continue to perform ethically purposeful deeds.
Yeah, this is not the same, but it reminds me of that thing that goes around about how if an atheist performs acts of charity and kindness and like does all these good deeds in their life, it's more meaningful than if a Christian does it because they're not doing it for their own sake. They're just doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. They're not motivated by some
Reward, yeah.
exactly. They're doing it because that's who they are. That
Yeah.
exemplifies what kind of person they are. All in all, death is an important part of everyday life, and we all do it unless you're Keanu Reeves
Or my cat.
or your cat. So the Old English word "ghast" denotes the human spirit or soul, both of the living and the deceased, or any good or evil spirit, like angels or demons. It's synonymous with the Latin spiritus in the meaning of breath or blast. The now prevailing sense of, thank you, the now prevailing sense of the soul of a deceased person, spoken of as appearing in a visible form, like ghost, only really emerges in Middle English. The modern noun does, however, retain a wider field of application, extending on one hand to soul, spirit, vital principle, mind, or psyche, the feeling or the seat of feeling, thought, and moral judgment, and is used figuratively to describe any shadowy outline or fuzzy or unsubstantial image.
Uh-huh. That sounds accurate.
Yeah. Well, those are, you know, that's kind of where it comes from. And, you know, obviously, ghast stems from some old ass word that really just means like the soul.
Well, I assume ghost and ghastly both have the same, like ghostly, and if something is horrifically ghastly, I assume that has the same root word.
But yeah, exactly. Because that word stems from Old Germanic, and like ghast and like ghastly is that word. I think it was like Geist, Geist, or like
That's
Geistig.
German, yeah.
Like
poltergeist.
Something. Because it's a longer word with more like letters, but I just can't remember what it is right now. Looking up the etymology, I was like, I'm never going to be able to pronounce this. I'm just going to talk about English.
That's fair.
Yeah. There are a couple words I want to use to divide ghosts into two categories that I've kind of talked about. They've both been used somewhat interchangeably with ghost, but once I explain things, you'll see what I mean, like why I've divided these two. So a specter refers to something that haunts or perturbs the mind and is specifically just a visible disembodied spirit. They're considered the same as apparitions, which literally just means appearance. They don't really make physical contact with the living, but rather a display of some sort of omen or message or signal to whoever they're appearing in front of. Specters or apparitions have been what?
That was me being a ghostly specter. Pointing, yes.
Specters or apparitions have been given official Western scientific study since the late 1800s, when the Society for Psychical Research was founded with the motive to provide evidence for human survival after death. Developments to these studies were then made nearly 100 years later, in which researchers attempted to actually categorize the different potential, apparitional experiences that people had, as well as their similarities and differences to oral and literary ghost stories. So, well, as you and I know, in the 1970s, that's when like categorization of everything was happening in science, especially. Like everybody was just trying to classify shit, like give names to everything. It was big in anthropology at the time, anthropology, archaeology.
Because we have to categorize things to make sense of them in our tiny human brains.
Yeah, we cannot understand broad concepts and metaphysical things. It's just not, no. So conversely to the specter, a revenant refers to a deceased person returning from the dead to haunt the living, either as a disembodied ghost or alternatively as an animated corpse.
Which we have talked extensively about by this point.
We have. Augustin Calmet conducted extensive research on the topic of revenants and other supernatural creatures. In his work titled Treatise on the Apparition of Spirits and on Vampires or Revenants of Hungary, Moravia, et al., wherein he discussed a multitude of topics on magic, sorcery, witchcraft, and ghosties. He ascribed revenants to sorcerers who sucked the blood of victims and compares instances of revenants mentioned in 12th century England and Denmark as similar to those of his case studies in Hungary. Some such 12th century English revenant stories come from William of Newburgh's Historia, where he argued that revenants were also akin to omens and symbols like warnings, the pointing finger, but they were capable of physical destruction and harming people and just generally causing terror. He also wrote of ghosts and other paranormal phenomena, and he considered his work to be an encyclopedia of reliable sources on the subject.
Oh, well, I'm sure he did.
I beg to frickin' differ if it was from the 12th century, but whatever. So parapsychology, while coined in 1889 by Max Dessoir, has actually been around for a really long time. All of these things that I've mentioned have been
parapsychological.
Parapsychology, basically. People talking about and thinking about ghosts and why they are and what they do. It comes in older, more ancient forms. People have had their rituals to study ghosties throughout time and space, but I think the best culmination of parapsychology can be found in the show we talk the most about, Supernatural.
Oh my god.
Yay.
Okay.
Obviously, being a CW show, they do an okay job at making things accurate and close to real life. Well, an okay job. Sam and Dean use all kinds of equipment, but that's mostly weapons, to hunt down ghosts. But they have a plethora of real available research and like institutional memory between them and other hunters like Bobby to know exactly what they need to find, track, and hunt ghosts. And a part of parapsychology is, making that extensive research and creating an institutional memory to understand why, what, how, etc. In Supernatural, there are so many kinds of ghosts. The ones I remember the most are what the internet and I refer to as vengeful ghosts. And those would be like the revenants, right? The ones who,
Yeah.
There are some specters as well, like when Bobby returns with a message from hell that the boys need to watch their backs. I think it was like in season 9. He was like, you guys need to be more careful. And then he kind of like becomes a vengeful ghost a little bit because he stays too long on the material plane.
Right.
Anyway, so in the world of Supernatural specifically, they have the different afterlife. They have the heaven and hell. They have purgatory. Ghosts exist in the veil and can appear on the earthly plane at will from the veil. They're stuck there in the middle ground because they haven't had a proper burial. Their souls were never avenged or redeemed, or because Metatron locked heaven, and so nobody could pass on. They had to all stay in the veil. That's why there were so many ghosts.
Such a bitch. Yeah.
I know. So there's a lot more to it than that, obviously, because the show lasted for 15 freaking seasons. I'll have to finally give it a rewatch so I can like have proper documentation about all of the different monsters and ghosties. I used to just have that as part of my memory. It was like my main hyperfixation.
I just remember the very first episode being the like lady in white ghost trope, but also kind of she's on the bridge, right? Which is kind of another trope, yeah. Like it combines a couple different ghost, like prevalent ghost stories or like urban legends, folklore, like really taps into that for that very first. Coming off strong, just diving right in.
Yeah, they just go right in there with ghosts.
Get right in there.
Yeah, they have a lot of like really specific named ghosts and stuff, but there are also a lot of like those monster of the week kind of vengeful ghost stuff.
Yeah. The ghost ship.
A ghost ship.
I remember the ghost ship being one.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to end talking about Supernatural.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. We love Supernatural.
I mean,
Favorite character is Bobby. R.I.P. Bobby. I quit watching when he died for like months. And then I had to deal with the stupid Leviathan season without Bobby.
really
Like,
only
what was the
seen it
point?
through one time, and I could not tell you like
It's
anything.
fine.
It's a thing that I
R.I.P.
did. And
R.I.P.
it's relevant a
Dean.
lot. Yeah. Well,
Rip.
that was really stupid.
That was really stupid. Anyway.
Anyway, stay tuned. Our bonus content of Supernatural Cast, where we
Yeah.
watch every single episode of Supernatural and talk about it.
Oh,
Just
that would be
kidding. That
fun.
would take 7 years.
It would take actually forever, yeah.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
Come back next week to hear more about ghosties.
Ghosts. Ooh.
Oh.
Well, that concludes this week's broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you wish to stay in touch, reach out to us at broadcastfromthebelfry@gmail.com or stalk us on Instagram at broadcastfromthebelfry. Again, I hope you've enjoyed our little show. Please rate and review. And until next week, stay